Yeah, so we're going to continue on because I'd like to get through our notes by Monday so that we can maybe have some time to do one last lab. Yeah, we skipped over those. So there's just some practice about energy pyramids and so forth, but we've talked about all that. So one aspect of ecology that we often study is a special type of connection between two organisms that we call symbiosis. Symbiosis is when two species live in very close association with each other, sometimes in or on one another, and there are a variety of types of symbiotic relationships. There's three types that we'll talk about: parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. You're probably familiar with parasitism. Parasite. What is a parasite? Like, how could you maybe define it, Abby?
Something that latches onto another organism to survive. An organism.
And feeds off of it, oftentimes. Close. It benefits one, but what about the other?
Kills.
Not kills. Parasites generally try not to kill their host.
They use the host as to use their energy to make them survive more,
Yes.
so they don't kill themselves.
Yeah, sometimes they use them for energy. Often they do. So in parasitism, one of the organisms in the relationship is injured or harmed in some way. We call that the host. And then the other organism benefits, the parasite. So lots of examples of parasites, and you're probably familiar with some. Tapeworm. We talked about tapeworms, right? I told you about my dog and all that.
No?
Yeah, we had a deworm my dog.
And remember we had the jar.
Yeah, the jar of tapeworms. Yeah. So tapeworms live inside of an organism, a person, an animal, another animal, and they basically are doing what you guys are mentioning. They live off of nutrients that that organism consumes, but they cause problems. They are basically stealing energy from the organism. They can cause infections. They can clog up the digestive tract. A flea living on a dog, again, parasitism. A flea is getting nutrients from the dog's blood, however, it's harming the dog. The lamprey that I showed you, we talked about fish. That's a parasitic fish. Okay, so those are all examples of parasitism. In mutualism, we have a very close symbiotic relationship, but both of the organisms are benefiting or gaining something positive out of the relationship. So, what, mutualism?
Yeah, a remora and a shark.
Okay, that cleans up around the shark. Yeah, here's another example. The Nile crocodile and the Egyptian plover bird. The Nile crocodile is a ferocious predator, carnivore, even kills people. The Egyptian plover is a tiny little bird. And the Nile crocodile will open up its mouth, and the Egyptian plover walks right inside of its mouth, pecks around for a while, walks right back out and leaves. They've established this mutualistic relationship. What does the plover get? The bird.
The little food particles.
Yeah, little bits of food from the crocodile's teeth. Crocodile, it's clean teeth that don't get infected, less likely to fall out, so they're both benefiting. Okay, bee insects and flowers have a symbiotic relation of mutualism where the insect gets nutrients from nectar and the plants get pollinated. There's the Egyptian plover.
Yeah, with remoras, like if a shark gets like tail whipped or like bitten by another animal, the remora will like stay on that area so it won't get infected or anything. It'll make sure it's clean because they got these weird suction cup heads.
Yeah, I'll show you a couple other examples in a minute. The last type is called commensalism. And in commensalism, one organism benefits and then the other is sort of not affected. It's not harmed, but it's also not helped. Like a barnacle that attaches to a whale, to its skin. The barnacle hitches a ride, it filters food out of the water as the whale's swimming, but it doesn't hurt the whale. It doesn't affect it really either way. A robin nesting in a tree. The robin benefits by having a place to build its nest, but the tree isn't harmed in any way. Just some pictures. Those are the lamprey and the trout. Oh, this is the goby and the shrimp. This fish and this shrimp that lives with it. And basically, they have this symbiotic relationship where the goby digs out a little hole, a little living space where they both live together. Okay, and they keep watch over each other. The shrimp is blind and so can't see. It keeps its antennae in contact with the goby. So when the goby goes back into their burrow, the shrimp will go with it because it knows there's danger around because the goby can find that danger.
It's like the goby's taking like care of his old brain
Yeah.
or something.
These are barnacles on the shell of a turtle, commensalism. They're not affecting it. This is a polar bear affected by parasitic worms, which are, yeah, it's so thin because there's so many worms, they're using up all the nutrients that the polar bear is not actually able
What's
to
on this
get as
forehead?
much. Here is this type of hermit crab, takes sea anemones, plucks them off of the floor of the ocean, and puts them on its shell
Really?
as protection against predators.
That's sick.
Lots of birds will spend time on mammals, picking at their fur, taking little bites and little insects from them. Yeah.
What was on the corner part?
I don't know.
Just a
I'm not
hole?
sure.
It's just a hole.
This is an interesting parasite.
That's awful.
The fungus.
Yeah.
Alright.
I've watched this video 18.
Whenever a huge tree falls in the Costa Rican rainforest, a gap of sunlight is formed in the canopy. New life competes for this light, like this vine racing this sapling upward. But there's one tree that never has any competition, thanks to an incredible symbiotic relationship it shares with an ant. The swollen thorn acacia and its namesake, the acacia ant, have developed harmonious roles in each other's lives. The ant's role is as protector. If any of those vines try to steal the acacia's light, the ant security guards go to work. A few good chomps on the vine stems, and it's lights out for the vine.
Whoa, yeet.
The ants don't stop there. This relatively huge grasshopper may think it's going to take a few bites out of
The next topic we'll talk about is this concept called succession. If you imagine, if your backyard at home, if you stop mowing it completely, you stop doing anything in your backyard, and then you left and you came back in 2 years, what would your backyard look? Not a forest.
Yellowstone.
What would it look like in 2 years?
It looks really hot.
High grasses, like lots of weeds probably. What about in 10 years?
Safe amount of grass.
Maybe you start to get some kind of shrubs, woody plants growing. Little saplings might start to take root there. What if you came back in 100 years? Yeah, you would have basically a forest like we see outside school in the Bus Springs Wind, a forest around the school, the woods. That's probably what you'd eventually have at your house. In our area, the typical type of forest that develops on disturbed land is called a temperate deciduous forest. The process that would take your backyard to that forest is called succession. So succession is the gradual change in an ecosystem over a period of time. One community is replaced by another, which is replaced by another, until some stable community is reached. So it's called succession. And the first organisms that can start to grow and develop in an ecosystem are called the pioneer community. If we imagine, let's say, if a field were completely plowed, so there were no plants or nothing growing, it was just bare soil, the first organisms to start to come in would be considered pioneer organisms. Pioneer organisms could even start to colonize bare rock. What kind of things can live on bare rock?
Like bugs, algae,
Oh,
yeah, like
So,
moss.
yeah, mosses, lichen, that like
Oh,
crusty
they're
stuff.
on trees and stuff.
Those are sort of the first things. They can grow right on rock, absorbing tiny bits of minerals from the rock. And as these very tiny pioneer organisms start to grow and eventually die, what starts to happen?
What? I didn't even hear your question.
What happens as these organisms start to die, Ella? And then what starts to build up? Very, very thin layer of soil. And then maybe more larger mosses can start to grow. And then as they start to decompose, soil gets thicker and thicker until you can support the other parts of the ecosystem, other stages of succession. Now eventually, if undisturbed, the ecosystem will form what we call the climax community. Like I said, in our area, it's a beech birch maple forest. That's a hardwood deciduous forest that's typical of our area. It's kind of the end point of succession. As long as it stays undisturbed, that's likely the ecosystem that will remain. Now, if there's a disturbance, a forest fire destroys the ecosystem, disturbs it, the process would repeat and start over again. In other areas, there might be other climax communities. For example, if we go just kind of north of where we are, or if we go up in elevation, the type of forest that would form changes. It starts to become like a spruce fir forest. If you ever go hiking in the Adirondacks up at the higher elevations, you'll see more of these spruce and fir trees and fewer of the other types of trees. If you go even farther north, you might get to the taiga, or even farther to the tundra. You get grasslands in the central part of the United States, deserts in the southwest, and tropical rainforests in South America. And so the climate is what determines which climax community will likely form. So the typical, we have, like we said, quick things that can grow on almost no soil, then grasses, herbs, shrubs eventually, some quick, fast-growing trees, and some slower-growing, larger trees eventually. That's our area's climate. But it even can take place in ponds. If you had a pond somewhere, eventually as sediments build up, a pond gets filled in slowly over time and starts to go through succession to form a terrestrial ecosystem. Okay? So, types of communities vary. Our last, I guess maybe we'll just do this slide and watch this quick video. So, the last section of our notes is about human impacts on the environment. How do humans affect our environment, our ecosystem? And as I'm sure you know, typically it's in a negative way. Humans have significant negative effects on the ecosystems around us. And the question we're going to ask is, well, why? Why do humans have such a huge impact? Well, there's a couple of main reasons. One is we can alter our environment unlike any other species. Imagine a place like in the southwest United States where there's desert. That would not be a hospitable climate for large populations. But we can bring water in from hundreds of miles away. We can construct buildings. We can provide air conditioning. Okay? We can bring food in from the outside. And we can have a city of millions of people in Las Vegas in the middle of a desert, which really should not be supporting very many people at all. We can alter our environment to a degree that no other species can. And then second of all, there are just a lot of us. Humans, how many people are on Earth right now?
7.3 billion.
You know, approaching 8 billion now. That is a lot of people. And all of those individuals use the Earth's resources. Some of us, for example, living here in the United States, use a large amount of resources in our daily lives. In other parts of the world, people use fewer resources, but all individuals need some resources from the Earth, things that we call natural resources. And the Earth's population is continuing to grow at an exponential rate. Let me show you this.